Imagine standing in the open plains as a storm rolls in. The sky bruises purple, the wind drops, and you look up, expecting the first strike of lightning. But instead, the clouds part and you see a shadow so unfathomably massive it eclipses the sun. Its wings span 20 feet, and the sound of them beating the air is indistinguishable from rolling thunder. This isn't a relic from the age of dinosaurs. This is the Thunderbird. Welcome back to Mythos Atlas. In our previous journeys, we have walked through the starving, frozen forests of the Wendigo, braved the radioactive fog of the Mothman, and waded through the cursed cedar swamps of the Jersey Devil. But today we are leaving the ground entirely. We are looking up into the most terrifying expanse of all, the open sky. Today, we are hunting a creature that bridges the gap between divine mythology and terrifying modern cryptozoology. We are tracking the giants of the native skies, the Thunderbirds. To understand the sheer scale of the Thunderbird, we have to strip away our modern understanding of the sky. Today, the sky is conquered by steel and jet fuel. But for thousands of years, the sky belonged to the gods, and the greatest of those gods wore feathers. Across North America, from the Pacific Northwest down to the Great Plains and across to the eastern woodlands, indigenous cultures shared a remarkably consistent belief in an avian apex predator of impossible size. This was not a spirit that lurked in the shadows. It was the storm itself. The Algonquian people called it Animikiai. The Lakota knew it as Wakinian. To the Kwakwaka'wakw of the Pacific Northwest, it was a central figure of their entire cosmology, carved into the highest points of their totem poles. Its wings spread wide to protect and terrify. The mythological Thunderbird was a creature of absolute elemental fury. It was said that the beating of its massive wings created the thunder that shook the earth. The lightning that split the sky didn't come from the clouds. It flashed from the creature's eyes or was cast down from its talons like glowing spears. But the Thunderbird was not a mindless monster like the Wendigo. It was a cosmic enforcer, a creature of balance. In many traditions, the Thunderbird was locked in an eternal, earth-shattering war with the great horned serpent, a malevolent creature of the deep waters and the underworld. When storms ravaged the plains, it was not just weather. It was a battle of gods. The Thunderbird hunted the serpent, diving from the stratosphere to drag the aquatic leviathan from the lakes, protecting humanity from the chaotic forces of the deep. Yet, alongside this divine reverence, there was a very real, very physical fear. The stories didn't just speak of a god. They spoke of a predator, a bird large enough to hunt whales in the ocean, a bird capable of swooping down and carrying off a fully grown elk, a horse, or a man. When we look at the biological reality of our world, the largest flying birds today, like the Andean condor or the wandering albatross, have wingspans of about 10 to 12 feet. They are scavengers or they hunt fish. They do not carry away heavy prey. But the descriptions of the Thunderbird speak of wingspans reaching 20, 30, or even 40 feet. They describe a raptor with plumage as dark as midnight, a hooked beak capable of snapping a human spine, and talons the size of a grizzly bear's claws. For a long time, European settlers and modern historians dismissed these accounts as pure allegory. They categorized the Thunderbird strictly as a religious symbol, a primitive way to explain the terrifying weather of the American continent. But as the 19th century dawned and the Western expansion pushed settlers into the deep, untouched territories of the United States, something strange began to happen. The sightings didn't stop. They merely changed from mythological oral traditions into newspaper reports and frontier diaries. The Thunderbird was no longer just a god of the storm. It was a flesh-and-blood cryptid hunting in the American wilderness. One of the most famous and controversial pieces of this puzzle comes from the dusty, blood-soaked era of the Wild West. The year was 1890. The location is the deserts near Tombstone, Arizona, a town already steeped in violence and legend. According to an article published in the Tombstone Epitaph, two ranchers were riding through the desert when they encountered a monster straight out of a nightmare. They described a creature that looked like a massive, winged alligator with a wingspan of over 160 feet. They claimed to have shot the beast out of the sky with their Winchester rifles, dragged its massive carcass to town, and pinned it with its wings stretched out against a massive barn. This story birthed one of the greatest mysteries in cryptozoology, the legend of the lost Thunderbird photograph. For decades, people have sworn with absolute, vivid certainty that they saw a photograph in an old book, a magazine, or a television documentary showing a group of cowboys standing shoulder to shoulder in front of a massive, pterodactyl-like creature nailed to a wooden wall. Yet, despite massive, coordinated hunts by researchers, historians, and internet sleuths, this photograph has never been found. It has become a phenomenon of collective false memory, a sort of cryptozoological Mandela effect. But why do so many people remember it so clearly? Is it a trick of the mind, or was a piece of impossible history quietly erased? Even if we dismiss the tombstone story as frontier sensationalism, we cannot dismiss what happened 87 years later. We are fast-forwarding from the dusty deserts of the 1890s to the quiet, suburban normalcy of 1977. We are moving from the realm of cowboys and tall tales to a warm summer evening in Lawndale, Illinois. This is the moment the Thunderbird crossed the line from folklore into terrifying modern reality. It was July 25, 1977. 10-year-old Marlon Lowe was playing hide-and-seek with his friends in his own backyard. It was a typical, peaceful American evening. The sky was clear. But then, a shadow fell over the yard. Two massive birds, described as being entirely black with white rings around their necks and wingspans exceeding 10 feet, silently glided over the trees. They didn't look like any heron, eagle, or vulture native to North America. They looked prehistoric. One of the birds banked sharply, its massive wings cutting through the air, and went into a dive. It wasn't diving for a rabbit or a stray cat. It was diving for Marlin. The bird hit the boy with terrifying precision. Its massive talons latched onto the shoulders of Marlin's shirt. The sheer power of the creature lifted the 65-pound child completely off the ground. Marlin screamed as he was carried 30 feet through the air, his feet dangling above the grass. His mother, Ruth Lowe, heard the screams from the kitchen. She ran out the back door and witnessed a scene that defied every law of nature and biology. She saw her son suspended in the air, gripped in the talons of a monster. Ruth didn't freeze. She screamed at the top of her lungs, charging at the beast. The sudden noise, the chaotic movement, or perhaps the sheer weight of the child caused the bird to falter. It released its grip. Marlin dropped safely to the grass, terrified but largely unharmed, his shirt torn by the massive claws. The two colossal birds flapped their wings, ascending quickly and disappearing into the darkening sky, leaving behind a family deeply traumatized and a town in shock. The Lawndale incident is a watershed moment in cryptozoology because it was witnessed by multiple people, including the parents and neighbors, and it happened in broad daylight. This wasn't a shadow in the woods. This was an attempted predation of a human child by an avian giant. When the story hit the news, skeptics immediately tried to tear it apart. They suggested it was a turkey vulture, an escaped condor, or just a hysterical exaggeration by a mother. But Ruth Lowe stood her ground. She was a rational woman and she knew what she saw. A turkey vulture weighs 4 pounds. It cannot lift a 65-pound boy. An Andean condor, while massive, does not have the gripping strength in its talons to carry heavy prey. They are built for scavenging, not for lifting. The creature that attacked Marlon Lowe was built like a raptor, an eagle of impossible, terrifying proportions. This attack blew the doors wide open. It forced people to look at the sky with a new sense of paranoia. If a creature this large was hunting in the suburbs of Illinois in 1977, where did it come from? Where was its nest? And more importantly, how had it remained hidden from modern science? The answer might lie in the vast, unexplored territories of North America, in the deep canyons and the high, inaccessible peaks where the air is thin and humans rarely tread. The Thunderbird isn't a creature of the dense forest. It is a master of the thermals, capable of gliding miles above the earth, unseen and unchallenged, only descending when it is hungry. But the Lawndale incident was only the beginning of a massive wave of sightings that would sweep across the United States. From the dense woods of Pennsylvania to the frozen wilderness of Alaska, reports began to flood in. People were seeing things in the sky that simply shouldn't exist. They were seeing the ancient gods of the storm, reborn in the modern age, casting shadows over highways and hunting in the deep valleys. The reign of the giant predators was far from over. As the echoes of the Lawndale attack rippled through the Midwest, the skepticism of the scientific community met a wall of eyewitness testimony that refused to crumble. If Marlon Lowe had been the only victim, the story might have faded into the cabinet of curiosities. But the summer of 1977 was merely the peak of a much larger, much darker cycle. Across the state of Illinois and into the neighboring cornfields of Indiana, a flap of sightings was occurring that mirrored the Great Panic of 1909 in the Pine Barrens. People were seeing shadows that spanned the width of two-lane highways. They were hearing the sound of sails snapping in the wind as massive wings displaced the air above their homes. This was no longer a matter of indigenous folklore. It was a modern aerial invasion. To understand how a creature of this magnitude could exist, we have to look at the gaps in our own fossil record. Millions of years ago, the skies were ruled by giants like Argentavis magnificens, a bird with a wingspan of 24 feet, or the teratorn, a monstrous bird of prey that lived alongside early humans in North America. These were not vultures. They were apex predators with hooked beaks and powerful talons, capable of swallowing prey the size of a wolf whole. Mainstream science insists these giants went extinct at the end of the last ice age. But cryptozoologists argue that the vast, uninhabited stretches of the Sierra Nevadas, the Rockies, and the Appalachian interior provide the perfect sanctuary for a relict population. A bird that can glide at 30,000 feet is essentially invisible to anyone not looking directly at the sun. They are the ghosts of the stratosphere, descending only into the lower atmosphere when the thermal vents or the hunger drives them down. One of the most chilling modern clusters of Thunderbird activity occurred in the early 2000s, far to the north in the rugged wilderness of Alaska. In 2002, residents of several villages, including Togiak and Manicotech, reported a bird so large it looked like a small bush plane circling in the sky. One pilot, a man trained to judge distances and sizes in the air, reported seeing the creature while flying his Cessna. He claimed the bird's wingspan was nearly equal to his own aircraft's wingspan, roughly 25 to 30 feet. This wasn't a sighting from the ground. This was an air-to-air encounter. The villagers were terrified to let their children play outside, echoing the fears of the Lowe family decades earlier. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game attempted to calm the public by suggesting the witnesses had seen a stellar sea eagle, a large bird with an 8-foot wingspan. But the witnesses scoffed. They lived with sea eagles every day. They knew what an eagle looked like. This was something else, a titan that made the eagles look like sparrows. But why the association with storms? Why did the ancients call it the Thunderbird? The answer may be purely functional. Large birds with massive wing areas rely on thermals, rising columns of warm air, to stay aloft without exhausting themselves by flapping. A massive storm front creates immense atmospheric pressure changes and powerful updrafts. A creature with a 30-foot wingspan would naturally follow the leading edge of a storm, using the turbulent air to lift its massive body into the clouds. To a person on the ground, the arrival of the great bird would be perfectly synchronized with the first cracks of thunder and the darkening of the sky. The bird didn't cause the storm. It rode the storm like a tidal wave. It was an opportunistic hunter, using the confusion and the low light of a tempest to strike at prey that was blinded by the rain. The terror of the Thunderbird is not just in its size, but in its predatory intelligence. In 2001, in the rolling hills of Pennsylvania, a man named Jesse Huffman reported seeing a bird with a wingspan of 15 feet perched in a tree at the edge of his property. He described its feathers as being greasy and black as coal, and its eyes as being intelligent and calculating. It didn't fly away when it saw him. It watched him. It assessed him as a potential meal. This is the recurring theme in Thunderbird encounters, the feeling of being hunted from above. Unlike the Mothman, which seems to appear as a silent witness to tragedy, the Thunderbird is an active participant in the food chain. It is a reminder that humans are only at the top of the pyramid because we have roofs over our heads. In the open air, we are nothing more than 60-pound targets for a raptor of sufficient scale. As we look at the lost photograph of Tombstone or the panicked calls from Alaskan villages, a pattern emerges. The Thunderbird represents a bridge between two worlds. It is the last remnant of the megafauna that once shared the continent with our ancestors, a living fossil that refuses to stay buried in the silt of the Pleistocene. It is a creature that thrives in the borderlands, the places where the mountains meet the clouds, and where the ancient myths meet the hard reality of a suburban backyard. It is the king of the high altitudes, a silent sovereign that has watched civilizations rise and fall from its perch in the jet stream. The Mythos Atlas maps the terrain of our fears, and there is no terrain more daunting than the empty sky. We have conquered the land, we have plumbed the depths of the oceans, and we have built cities that glow like beacons in the night. But every time a shadow passes over a sunny field, or every time the wind picks up before a summer storm, we feel that ancestral prickle on the back of our necks. We look up, half expecting to see those 20-foot wings blotting out the sun. We listen to the thunder, wondering if it's the sound of the atmosphere or the sound of feathers striking the air. The Thunderbird reminds us that the world is still wide, still wild, and still dangerous. It tells us that some gods didn't go away. They just moved higher up, waiting for the right storm to bring them back down to earth. As long as there are unexplored canyons in the west and vast, silent forests in the north, the legend will remain. The sky is not empty. It is a hunting ground, and the giant predators of the native skies are still circling, high above the clouds, watching and waiting for the next flash of lightning to signal their descent. Thank you for journeying through the storm with Mythos Atlas. We have faced the hunger of the woods, the rot of the swamps, and the shadows of the sky. But our map is far from complete. Next time, we travel to the mist-shrouded highlands of Scotland to confront a nightmare born of the salt spray and the ancient plague. A creature with no skin to hide its muscles and a breath that can wither crops. Prepare yourselves for the skinless terror of the north, the Naklavi. Until then, keep your eyes on the horizon. Seek shelter when the clouds turn black, and remember, when the thunder rolls, it might not just be the weather. This has been Mythos Atlas. Stay safe under the open sky.